1 units on Route 35, which has a 24 unit bonus, the 50 units on Middle Road, which has a 50 unit bonus, and the 12 units, I mean, it doesn't really matter really, on Palmer Avenue. Those 3 projects with the bonuses and those other mechanisms that I discussed earlier get us to the 297, and therefore put the township in compliance with their round 3 plus, I'll call, affordable housing obligation of 297. We have, just as a side note, we have, as Andy indicated, we had a very long fairness hearing where we adjudicated Palmer Avenue and Middle Road. The only difference in this particular proposal is initially the proposal was for a development on North Beer Street, which is between the hospital and the Parkway. The developer of that particular property, after going to settlement negotiations with the judge over a series of months, sitting through a fairness hearing, came back to us and said, we can't do it. So 35 is now the substitute for that. That 35 site is the only one that hasn't gone through a full fairness hearing, but as I indicated, they do have their LOI, which would be the only question mark. So it's my professional opinion that the plan as proposed complies with the regulatory requirements, it's consistent with the settlement agreement and what has been represented to the court, and puts the township in compliance through 2025.
Now, can you share about the Route 35 wanting to take over the Palmer?
Sure. So I know that we were supposed to have this hearing, was it like the first meeting in September, right? Like end of August, beginning of September. So ordinances were proposed to the township committee, were not seconded, so they did not move forward, so this process did not move forward. Andy and I have had now at least 3, if not 4 meetings with the judge. The Route 35 developer had indicated a willingness to take the units from Palmer Avenue in addition to the North Piers and just have one project. And the judge, in no uncertain terms, said no.
Yeah, she had indicated no because the Palmer was in township's prior settlement agreements with Fair Share, and Palmer had rights pursuant to that agreement, and so she, at least on a preliminary basis, had indicated that she would enforce the settlement agreement, which is equivalent to a contract under state law. So that as a result, we kept Palmer in the plan because it was going to be there whether we agreed to it or if we didn't agree to it. So that we might as well get the credits for it.
And
that was our thinking.
And then that would allow us to keep the overall number on 35 lower, because if they're not going to provide an additional 12 housing units, there's not going to be an additional 60, because it was like another 60 market rate units associated with the project to get to those 12 additional units. If the judge was going to force us to keep Palmer Avenue in the plan anyway, we might as well keep the overall density and the number of units on 35 lower, which enabled us to remove, initially Route 35 came in as 4 stories over parking, which was a concern. This enabled us to eliminate that 4th story, so it's 3 stories over parking, which was more in keeping with the overall intent of the committee. So that's kind of where we ended up.
Jim, related to the Palmer site, you mentioned that the developer has DEP approval.
Yep.
What does that mean exactly in relation to historic flooding on that?
They have their flood hazard permit, which means that the drainage, the stormwater, the current circumstance, the circumstance in the post-development situation has been vetted out, reviewed by the DEP, who has the ultimate jurisdiction, and the buffer line on the stream corridor is set. So that basically means that the DEP has reviewed and approved their drainage plan.
And so when this project is built, in the DEP's opinion, there won't be flooding.
I mean, I don't know if you were on the board. You may have been on the board when this came the last time.
Yes.
So they had not yet gone to the DEP, but the concern was that this project was going to exacerbate the flooding in the area. And even though the developer's engineer and Bonnie Hurd at the time had indicated that the stormwater management regulations require a development to have less runoff post-development than pre-development, and that even though they acknowledge that there's an issue at that location, the development alone was not going to add to it. There was a funding issue with respect to that project, and there was a timing restriction, and because it kept getting delayed, the developer at that point chose not to, let's say, cross-examine the objector, who had some, let me be very clear, questionable conclusions. But they have always maintained that the development of that project is not going to make the situation worse. It's not going to solve the problem, because the problem is not just this property, it's the area. I do know that the county has elevated the roadway to allow for emergency vehicles to get through, because that was a concern at the time. And that was a direct result of that application, because that went to the county, complained about the flooding at that location. So there was, so they did mitigate it to a certain extent by elevating the roadway, but there has always been a representation on that developer, who's not this developer, and this developer, who went through a total testimony at the fairness hearing about the drainage, that the post-development condition will not be worse than the pre-development condition.
Did the developer agree to desnag?
They agreed to
desnag the
yes,
stream as
twice
well?
a year they agreed to go through the stream corridor and desnag, because if like branches come down, things come down, it does not allow for the carrying capacity of that stream to be what it should be. So they have agreed to go in and do that twice a year, which will help. It's not going to solve the problem. I'm not going to sit here and say, by the way, there's not going to be any issues over there anytime soon, because that's not honest. But this particular development has been reviewed by the DEP. They understand the existing conditions, and they have determined that this will not make it worse. That's what that permit
So it
says.
sounds like if and when this proceeds, he's ready to break ground and get moving, and the court seem happy to have that happen as well.
I will say, I don't know about,
Well, the court certainly is insistent that we keep it in the plan because the township had originally agreed to put it in the plan. I don't think, the court doesn't really care if it gets
Happy
built
might
or
not
not,
be the right word,
but yeah,
wanted it.
in essence, but yeah. Because we had made a commitment, we, the township, had made a commitment concerning that project, so the court was holding us to that.
Of course, they still have to come back here for something.
yeah, they still have to come back. So the zoning has to get, is scheduled for a public hearing before the township committee a week from today. And then once the zoning is in place, the developer will be in a position, if and when, hopefully, that it gets approved at the committee, they can come in anytime after that. They're going to have to submit full site plan application, same as you always get, drainage reports, traffic report, everything. Have a public hearing. The public has an opportunity to comment. So it's not to say that once our master plan gets approved that it's like a signed, sealed, and delivered. They still have to go through the process.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, so for those of you that, yes, no? For those of you that came a little bit late, let me go through the process again. As you just heard, we had presentations from both our co-attorney and our township planner. The board asked their questions at this time. If you are represented by counsel, I would ask that your counsel ask questions on your behalf, and if you have questions, to go through your counsel. If you have other questions, or if you are not represented by counsel, I would ask you to keep this first period to questions only. We'll allow time for comments after all the questions have been asked, because maybe your comment will have an answer that be answered in a question. So, and I would ask you again, please don't be repetitive or redundant. Like to be respectful of everyone's time. So, if there's anyone that likes to be heard at this time, please raise your hand and I'll recognize you one at a time. Ralph Blumenthal, please. And please come up, state your name and your address for the record. And you might need to spell it as well. Not you, Ralph, because we know you.
Hi, good evening, Ralph Blumenthal, 41 Stony Brook Road.
Excuse me, and direct your questions through the chair and we'll move them where we need to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I do have some comments, and they sort of intertwine with this questions, but I'll try to separate them
Thank you.
per your request. Just because I have it on the coverage note
No
here.
problem.
One question, concern that applies a little bit to all three of the sites, and based on what has occurred with some of the other applications, and I didn't see it in the two zoning ordinances that we have. there were concerns about access of school buses for school children. All of these developments are big enough and they're family units that the odds are each of them will have some school children. The Route 35 one, obviously it's on Route 35, which by itself creates entrance-exit issues, but it's even more complex with school buses. Palmer Avenue, there are been other developments proposed along there, and it was not ever clear how one would deal with school children. Has that been addressed for these three sites?
Well, just so you know, Palmer Avenue, when they did come, they were building a pad for the kids to stand on, so
But
that
the school
was,
people have not finalized approval of that, though.
the school people don't have to do that, they just have to.
Well, if
They don't
they're
have to
gonna allow-
finalize where a pad is, it's part
No,
of the
but
plan.
they have to agree that the spot is safe, otherwise they don't let the school bus stop.
Well, if it's in their parking lot, it can't be any safer, but Jen, you
Yeah.
could.
So these are site plan related issues, so this is the master plan element that just identifies the site and the proposed project. The site plan applications for all three of those projects will have to come before this board for an approval. At that time, I would anticipate that the developer will have at least had preliminary conversations or will have conversations, but the location of bus stops is outside the jurisdiction of the township. It's solely within the jurisdiction of the Board of Ed, and something that they're gonna have to negotiate and deal with. I do agree that it is an issue, but I will say that, you know, driving around, it's my personal opinion that the bus now stops at every freaking driveway. So, you know, like the whole days of old where you walk to the bus stop seems to be a thing of the past. But that's definitely an issue that's more related to site plan, that's not relevant to this particular, this entity.
And on the Birdie Woods application for the
That's-
zoning board, they did impose a condition that they get Board of Ed approval to
And
stop.
and that has failed.
Hasn't happened to me, yeah.
And we
I'm not
have
sure
a
it
development,
failed,
we do have a development on Route 35. The bus goes in and comes out without incident.
But the board did make that a condition and it's still being worked out.
So long as
They have
it's
to come
not
back
a
from
dead
it.
end cul-de-sac where they would have to like back out, generally correct. If the buses can circulate through, they will, but it's definitely something that each individual
That
developer
did
is
come
gonna
up
have to
in Palmer
negotiate.
Square, in the Palmer Avenue last time.
It did, and they were gonna put a pad out
Yes.
on Palmer Avenue with the bus shelter.
Then, first, the re-exam report, which is relatively slim and straightforward, but it did include recommended zoning changes for the three properties in question.
Correct.
I was able earlier today from Wendy to get the two zoning ordinances that are up for December 10th, but that was two, not three.
Correct.
What is the state of the third one?
So the third
Middle
one
road.
is a municipally sponsored 100% affordable project. So the court imposed deadline for that particular, actually, so the court imposed deadline for that would be later on. Typically what happens is you go through fairness and then you have about 4 months for compliance, at which time a lot of these things would be handled. So that would be something that's gonna be handled later. It's not gonna be handled current, like the zoning associated with that site.
But it will become municipal as of Friday, most likely municipally on the property. So we can.
So the
treat
rules
it
are a little
together.
different.
It still will have to go through a zoning and site plan process.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah. That will come later.
Okay. No. I certainly heard, you said it more than once, that 297 was the minimum. And it's based on a lot of complexity.
Correct.
One of the required things in the housing plan element is demographic information. It didn't quite give all the formulas that leads from demographics and everything else to the 297. But let me have a couple of specifics here,
She's
though.
gonna-
I will tell you who will handle it.
It's the chair's
Okay.
call, not my call.
But,
I don't want that.
so I
Sure.
appreciate that the relationship is, shall we say, a little bit iffy.
Yes.
But there is a relationship,
Kind
so
of.
that if the demographic information isn't correct, to me, that says maybe the 297 isn't correct.
That's not correct. So the demographic information that's provided in the master plan traditionally comes from either county information or the census. The formula for obligation has about 800 parts to it.
It's very similar
So
to the school
even
funding
if you
formula.
were to say that the population is 10,000 off, it would generate maybe a 0.01 difference in the number. It's filtering, it's developable land, I mean, there's
Okay.
a whole host of it to where, which is why Andy had indicated that there were specific experts, economists out of Philly. Initially, it was Dr. Bichelle out of Rutgers who initially wrote the COA regulations that were doing it. He then got sick, the towns had to hire eConsult, which came out of Philly. The Fair Share used Dr. Kinsey. I will tell you that we could sit here for 24 hours straight and you're still not gonna, I don't get
Well,
it.
the only thing
I accept that. Let me point out the issue, the specific demographic question that I have.
Sure.
On page 5, there is a population trend data, which has 2010, which is the official census, 2015. We're 1 month from 2020. We're less than that at this point. And this covers the period up to 2025, not 2040. So we're halfway to 2025. And the most recent data here is 2015. However, more recent data does exist. For the county, for example, I was able to get official census data for 2018. And the county's population is down by 10,000. It says, how come? Well, we've lost jobs, Bell Works, Lucid, the Fort. So the county's population is meaningfully down in the middle of this period and not up.
So,
We've
So
gained
what-
jobs in Bellworks and in.
But we're
and-
nowhere, if you look at the parking lot, which when the building was full, was parking lots were out to the edge. We're
I drive there
nowhere
every
near.
day. Some days it takes me 6 minutes just to walk to my office from my car, so.
Yeah, but there's a ways to go.
It is, and the Ford is also,
It's starting.
is also, not starting, it's a good 2/3 through.
Tin
so-
Falls is almost 100% done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, and
Okay.
I don't know where you got the number from, but it's probably, I don't know. who
And I
gave
will
it.
tell you that our demographic information, which is part of the quote-unquote housing element portion, has no bearing on the fair
Okay.
share portion.
Okay, well, anyway, the official census number says the county at 621, which is down from 630. Page 19.
Has that been published, Val?
Yes.
Is that published?
Yes. And I've seen it, for the county, I've seen the number in a number of different places. 620, 621, 622 for 2018, maybe up from 621 to 622 for 2019.
Okay.
Then, page 19, the workforce by sector. The second row for agricultural says 0. I question that. We certainly have preserved farms with houses on them, with people living in them and doing farming within Holmdel.
I understand that it came from the census.
Well,
I'm not, I mean, I don't really have the ability myself to change census demographic information.
okay, I just want to bring these up as questions in my mind.
Right.
At this point,
I heard that
It doesn't change at all the 297 number. It has
Right,
no
that's what I
impact
asked before,
whatsoever.
it's 297 locked in, it's
Right.
locked in,
I
so
heard
it's
that.
all,
And
It's a lot of
last,
noise.
yeah, lastly, on 21-22, the projected employment data, which says that employment by 2024 is going to be, in the county, is going to be up by 20,000, or with the population down 10,000. I had difficulty believing that. Okay, we'll skip, go on, move on. Oh. Page 23, water and sewer. The statements here is that we've got 2 suppliers in Holmdel. That's not correct. New Jersey American purchased Shorelands, and that closed on the April 3rd of 2017. There is now only one commercial called supplier of water to Holmdel.
hey Jen, didn't they start doing all this in 2015?
Correct.
So everything we based on
I mean,
2015.
that's kind of when we started it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And, well, in that case, in the same page at the bottom, it talked about Bell Labs now Lucent. It hasn't been Lucent for, I think, 5 years at least.
So what I would suggest, if we're talking about typographical issues
works.
and things that actually have no impact whatsoever on the meat of the document. If you just send it to me, I'll be happy to make whatever changes you need. But unless it actually affects the number and the projects that are addressing the number, you could just send those to me.
That's a good idea. I'm sure, I saw those too, I just didn't have a moment to tell you.
Yeah. Then, with regard to page 35, is mentioned the Route 35 project. It's 170 units, of which 31 are affordable.
Correct.
And just a moment ago, you did describe that this is going to have to go through a fairness hearing, et cetera, because the fairness thing had the North Piers in it.
Correct.
Now, the North Piers only had 97 units and netted 31
Yep.
units.
Correct.
Why do we have to accept twice as many units just because it's on Route 35?
That the North
There's
Piers.
a significant additional impact
Okay,
on
can
the
you let him
township.
answer the question?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we agree. That North Piers negotiation happened through the judge at the time who was handling the matter. And as Jen pointed out, after the developer agreed to it, after the township approved it, after the court approved it, the developer came back to the township and said, I can't make this work. Because they also had 20,000 square feet of medical office as part of that approval. And they weren't able to their representation of us is they weren't able to market the 20,000 square feet medical, and they needed another 60 market rate units to make the project work. And given that they had previously agreed to the 97, their after the fact request for an additional 60 market rate units was not well received.
So that would bring them to 157,
Well,
plus the affordables. Now it's 170, including the affordables.
right, but, okay, that then just moves the question. In Middle Road, we're able to do a 100%, so that one doesn't have this add-on multiplier effect.
Because the township is condemning the property and purchasing it.
Can
They
the
only have
township
so
do
much-
more of that?
Well, there's only so much money that they have, right? So
Right, so the Middle Road, the Middle Road appraisal for the township came in at $1.5 million, $1,520,000. And the property owner is saying it's worth a lot more than that through this process. And so there's, as the chairwoman pointed out, there's significant financial constraints. There's only so many properties we could buy in Holmdel at a couple $1 million. And fair share through the settlement process frowns upon multiple 100% affordable housing projects in one town. So through this process statewide, there are many 100% affordable housing projects, and the funds the tax credits that are available to fund these projects through the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency is very limited, and they compete against one another. So fair share, I would almost say, I never like to say rightfully, but fairly says, well, if you have two in one town, they're never both going to get funded. It's
Right.
not realistic.
100%.
So that we agree from a density development standpoint, we're as professionals always favor that, but there were limits to how many units you could do in one town that way.
So, but on the other hand, if in fact, after we're done, let me just throw this out there, hypothetical. If in fact, when we're finished, if the township committee so desires and there are dollars left over in that affordable account, could they buy down the difference somewhere else?
Yeah. Well, subject to court approval.
I mean, you know.
Right, so on this last one on Middle Road, right, so that is an option that's available to them. We have to go with it the way it is, because that's what we need to get to the number, right? But if, once the condemnation hearing takes place on Friday, the judge will come up with a number that day, correct?
No.
Okay,
The
when's
judge
number?
the judge on Friday is just going to say whether or
Yes, you
not we
can.
have the right to take the property.
Okay,
As a
when
matter-
will the number be known? Because there was
Probably-
obviously it's fine out of money.
Probably in 6 months to a year. So that it's a lawsuit. The court appoints condemnation commissioners, where we're going to have a hearing before commissioners about the value. if either side's unhappy with the commissioner's decision, that gets appealable to the Superior Court.
Just think about all those people who need affordable housing are
Correct.
waiting. That's great.
Well, no, because we're gonna own the property. That's not
We
gonna.
can move forward with the
we're-
project,
we're
it's
gonna
just gonna
just
be a
fight-
matter of how much we
yeah.
have to give them
We're
in terms
just,
of the cost.
yeah, we're just
Okay.
fighting about value right now.
So if on the, and when that's finished, let's just take, for instance, we have three, like, when I left, it was 3 million. I'm sure it's not because we paid all those 10,000s out and all that stuff, right? But just for
It's
argument's
about
sake.
that, it's about that still.
Okay, so we're at 3 million. So if you have to pay $2 million to him, you have $1 million left over.
Right.
We can go back to the court and say on Middle Road with, it's a possibility, we could go back. It's something we can investigate going forward, that we would go back to the developer and say, instead of building 170 units here, we're gonna buy 10 of them, you don't build those 10. We can do that, possibly.
At Route 35?
Yes.
Yeah,
Kind of,
possibly, yeah.
There are
but-
other things that
Or
we'll have to
one
pay
of
for,
them.
but yes, if there's surplus money, we can certainly investigate the potential at that
Yes.
point of using it.
Ultimately, the
But
court
right now,
would
it's an
have to-
unknown, so we could
Because we have to
theoretically
wait
have
until
to
that
pay
other thing is
2.8
paid.
million, so you just don't know. how
We
much
don't,
it's
we
gonna
don't know
be.
the number for the value.
Could one not apply the same thing to Palmer? For example, so instead of having to have 60 total units with 12 affordable, we
Yes,
get
this-
50 in 12.
Right.
Yes.
And, you know, the long term, 10 fewer units,
We'll
it's
make
a
difference,
financial
absolutely.
thing, but it's an impact of children, schools, all the rest. It's a long-term
Yes,
financial.
it's definitely
We-
something, when we get to that point, we can certainly
And
look
we
into,
have,
but it's not gonna stop the process in the meantime.
Yep.
Okay, good. In the,
I asked everybody to be kind of brief, but you've been up there almost 20 minutes, so if you could wrap it up, that would be great.
Let's brief. One last question. In the appendix is the text of the settlement agreement that was signed in
That's the
January.
original settlement agreement, it's
Correct.
subject to be amended, and there's language in the plan that says that it's amended, and I think it's scheduled next week, correct?
And that's because of the change in the site.
Correct.
Correct.
But my question is on page 5, it says for Middle Road that the municipality is required to provide a form of development costs and sources.
Yeah.
The township will include this information as part of the housing element and fair share plan. I don't see any of that information in this document.
We're not at that point yet.
So what we've been in, as I think the deputy mayor pointed out, discussions with a developer. We have to formalize that arrangement. It should be coming soon. And then we will get from that developer who's actually going to build the project a pro forma as to that information. We don't,
So
and
does
we'll
this,
provide it. We'll
this
provide it
document
the
have to be
board.
updated and replaced in another hearing on it then?
I don't think so. The settlement agreement, yes, but I don't, the housing element and fair share plan, no. So the language in the amended housing and the amended settlement won't say it will be included in the housing element and fair share plan. Typically, what happens is this: the town enters into the settlement agreement, they go to a fairness hearing where the court approves the settlement agreement, and all these implementation measures take place afterward. Here, we're a little different because we have to amend it because of the North Beer Street and the fact that we're kind of under a court order to get this done by the end of the year, so we're a little out of order. That's why it's a
So
little
the
different.
plan will be amended, but it will not be another hearing. That information will
Settlement
be added to
The
the...
settlement agreement will
Right.
Will be
be,
added to the plan, but we will not have another hearing.
And ultimately,
No, it says it's not going to be added to the
well,
plan.
well, not to the housing element, but ultimately the township will have to provide that information
to the court.
to the court master and to the court as part of the its compliance
Then it will
obligation.
become part of the public record.
It will be part of the
Yeah.
public record.
Yeah, it just
at
won't be
that
But
part of
not-
this document.
oh, well,
Correct.
Okay, so it won't be here.
Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy Weber?
Kathy Weber, 4 Duncan Drive. The Route 35 property, 170 units. Why are we not doing 34, 20% affordable instead of 31 to either mitigate the number of units needed at Palmer or to give us 3 units for the next round?
Jen?
So the reason that they're providing 31 is that that was the number that was being provided to us at North Beer Street. So initially, we were going to try to add Palmer Avenue to it to have them give us 43 affordable units, and the judge was not in favor of that. And to say she was not is an understatement. And this particular developer because 35, or because North Beers basically said they could do it and then at the 11th hour bailed on us and we have to get another 31 units, and I will tell you that Andy and I and Deputy Mayor can attest, like, he started at much higher number than 170 and we bludgeoned him to death to get him to 170. I mean, he was like in the high 180s, almost 190s at the 31. I'll give you 4 more.
There's so much work that has to be done to that site. I mean, you're talking, you have to dig down, just to say, there's a lot of digging, and they want to put the crushed stone so that they can.
So
limit impervious
infrastructure
coverage.
costs.
Well, and
Sorry
the
about
parking
covering
is
a
kind
lot of
of
costs.
below the building,
Right.
so to elevate the building is an expense as well. To have like structured parking, I mean, it's not a parking garage, it's just one level, but the representations that they made is that part of the
But what we
parking
wanted to say
is
is we don't
below
want it to be
grade to keep
above
the overall
homes.
height lower.
So when you're on 35, you're not going to see this big thing.
It's not going to be
You
4
want it
stories.
to, right, you want it to be, you want to see it low, they have to go down.
Okay, so basically, we can neither drop them to 162 units
No,
to
they need to
equate to
make-
the
yeah.
31, nor push them to 34 for the 170. Not an option.
They took the position for every additional affordable housing unit above the 31, they wanted
4 more.
4 more market. And it just kept going, and the back and
Went for
forth
hours.
was substantial. I've known his attorney a long time, and we're professionally friendly, and I was screaming at him out of frustration. Let
Okay.
me just say.
And then this other question is further down the road. I just want to know where to get the information because I couldn't discern it from the report.
Sure.
I'm assuming in these rental units that the distribution of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom is all specified by
Correct.
law.
So they're in the they're called UHAC regulations. So a maximum
UHAC,
UHAC,
Uniform,
Housing Affordability Control Act.
it's a COA regulation.
So a maximum, and this is per project,
Okay.
a maximum of 20% of the affordables can be 1 bedroom. So if it's 1 point something, it's 1. A minimum of 20% have to be 3 bedrooms, right? So if it's 1.2, it has to be 2. And then the balance can be 2 bedrooms. And they very, very rarely deviate from that.
And the settlement agreement with Fair Share that was approved by the court requires the developers to meet those bedroom distribution requirements.
Okay, and in addition, it's my understanding that the units have to be provided a certain number, low income, very low income, and moderate
Correct.
income,
Same
right?
state law.
And those are specified as well somewhere?
50% moderate,
State law.
50% moderate, 50% low. Of the 50% low, 13% have to be very low.
So, and the 11 Medicaid units qualify for the
For
very
very
low?
Oh, sweet.
Correct.
So
So
we
the
only have 8 across all 3 projects?
correct. That have to be very low.
That have to be very low. And the numbers for very low are 1 bedroom, 1 person, 21,000 per year. So. that's
Yeah, because the
kind of
moderate is a significantly higher
Higher
income.
Correct. And the higher the number of people in your family, the
More amenable to our,
Yes.
to sustaining a cost of living in
Correct.
Holmdel.
Yeah.
So,
The
okay.
very low unit income range goes from
Yeah.
21,000 to 40,000,
Okay, thank
depending
you.
on the family.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Okay. Winston, you could be next, sir.
Regina Cristiani, 35 Ramlingbrook Drive. Should I spell it? Criscione. Why do I even ask? I just have one question.
Sure.
When you got whoever got the DEP approvals for Palmer Avenue.
Correct, the developer.
Did they take into account the development on Taylor Lane in Middletown that was already accounted for? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir, thank you.
Hi, Robert Gannerkey, 77 Arlington Court. I had a couple of
Can you
questions.
spell it?
One was,
Can you spell your last name, please, sir?
oh, sorry, Gengerke.
I'm pretty sure we weren't
We
going
go through
there.
this every The measurements for the water table. There was a big dispute about that the last time we had this entire thing.
The planning board, that was the site plan application.
Right.
Correct.
And there was a big dispute about that. And they discovered, well, there was inaccurate information. Mr. Nicholas spearheaded a campaign to get Rutgers involved, and they did a study. Since that study's completed, since they stopped collecting data, we have had the road raised, which will change that, because as the person from the county informed us, yeah, that's going to clear the road, but that's not going to change what's going on in the area. The lakes, the creek is still going to overflow and so forth. The same thing is happening with the construction. It's not completed across Route 35 in Middletown. That will, by its nature, affect the creek. It seems imprudent, if I'm not mistaken, to proceed with their construction plan before we know the effects on that water level, before anything has been done to examine it. I would like to have Rutgers back in to look at it.
So what I will say is this. I am not disputing anything you're saying, but that's a site plan application when that particular development application comes to the board. This is the overall plan as we went, you were there at the fairness hearing, to just address our obligation. I will say that the permits issued by the DEP have been issued this year. They have not, they're not old, they're not, they've been issued this year. So, and the DEP is the body that has jurisdiction over flood hazard and wetlands. So I would encourage you, and I can almost guarantee you will physically be there at the meeting if they come to the board at that point. So I have no doubt. So what I would just recommend is that I don't dispute the question. I would put a pin in it because it's not really appropriate for this entity, but it's more appropriate for the site plan application for that particular application.
And one other thing that just hit me, which is during the permitting process before DEP, we were advised that Palmer Square, the association, submitted opposition to the permit request to DEP. You may know that. We didn't see it, but the attorney for Palmer Avenue told us that Palmer Square submitted opposition to the permit request. So that must have been evaluated by DEP before they issued the permits. I don't know if you made the same arguments or not, because I didn't see the opposition.
Well, we wouldn't have made those arguments yet because they hadn't raised the road yet, and we didn't even know about the construction at the time.
Okay. That just happened in this year, though.
The permits, yeah.
The permitting process was, this happened.
Recently.
Yeah, they
It was
didn't
just
raise the
in the
road
last
till the end of August, beginning of
Yeah,
September.
anyway, that's all I know.
Could you tell me how many units, this is the only other question I
Sure,
have.
sure.
How many units overall, affordable and non-affordable, just market rate and affordable, how many units overall are in that settlement agreement?
280. Well, 280 new units.
New units, that's what I mean.
New.
280 new units.
So between the three sites, the affordable and the market rate are 280 new units.
And other items, other locations that were in the settlement agreement?
So there were existing affordable units located somewhere in Fox Chase, the orchards.
But were there, but new construction, how many
That's
new
it,
units?
280.
Just 280?
Yep.
So we're building 280 new units in basically if you did a radius, I know it's got to be within a 2-mile diameter, so a 1-mile radius is where all the major construction is happening.
I don't disagree. I don't know. I'm not going to agree that it's 1 mile. Okay, so I'll assume, but I do agree that it is in one area for sure. And as I indicated earlier, the issue is developable land, sewered. If there's no sewer, it does not qualify. So the whole southern part of the town not only is it not sewered, but it's not in the sewer service area. So it's ineligible for these projects. And that was one of the things that we talked about earlier.
And
is
then
that
there's other things like infrastructure, getting back and forth to work, how
Close-
you get
close
it,
to transportation,
all those
correct.
things are also part of the.
So it's
So it's
unfortunate,
got
but
to
I
be
don't
close
just
to public transportation?
They
generally
They say that.
generally.
But
They
there is no
understand.
public transportation from any of these three sites.
There is nowhere in Holmdel, so, but if you were looking in other towns.
There's buses on
New Jersey-
Thursday.
There is
buses
one bus
Right.
on Route 35 that
Academy.
goes to the city.
Academy also.
One bus in the morning, one bus
There
at
you
night.
go.
Well,
That's all you need. And it's close enough where you can get to the train station So there's
But
enough
how do you-
transportation in that hub, and that's how they go by it. It's not our rules.
I'm sorry, Mr. Masso, that it's not easy to get to the train station unless you have a car, in which case
But
you're probably
according
not in the
to, do you
affordable
know,
housing.
it is for them because they have, like they have, that you can walk, as long as there's a walkable route, it is for them. It doesn't matter how far away it is. You can also walk up to Route 36. While it doesn't seem like it's close enough for their regs, where you can get onto Route
And-
36
and
and get buses.
You get a section.
The regulations do encourage development near transportation opportunities, but given the fact that New Jersey in general, I mean, the regs are written statewide, they're not written specifically for Holmdel. And there are many towns where a bus doesn't even go through.
Right.
So the biggest determining factor is sewers. And that's really what's leading the development to the northern section of town.
But even when we had another intervener who wanted to take on these units, it was, I don't mean to be rude, but you strongly opposed it.
Well, I don't know, we didn't strongly oppose
Well,
it. The committee chose the sites.
We do have clients.
I mean.
A client, I should say.
And that is part of the
Yeah.
process. That's part of the reason why
not
you
personal.
continue to participate is that the elected officials have the ability to determine how to address this issue. And so every site does not need to be included. I can tell you that in other towns that Andy and I work in, there is a couple of very unhappy individuals because they were not selected. So just because other sites exist
understand.
doesn't mean that they're considered.
I would not say that just because somebody didn't get a contract or didn't get included, that that's a legitimate cause for concern. The reason I'm concerned is because what our attorney at Palmer Square conveyed to me is that back when Judge O'Brien was looking at it, he said, well, it appears that we can remove Palmer Avenue from the equation because we have X, Y, and Z, which will each take up some of the slack. And the other intervening parties all said, yeah, we could take, one person was offering to take 6, one offered to take 4, one offered to take 2, and this was opposed back when Judge O'Brien said, let me take it off the table. And we were actually quite mischaracterized as being anti-affordable housing. And you've all heard me say this, I'm the poster child for affordable housing. I lived in Stuyvesant and Manhattan for 33 years. I believe in it. I also believe in it being very inclusive and being spread out across the area. Because otherwise, and I got nothing against a project that could take some heat off of Palmer Avenue, but frankly, building something that is high density and all affordable up on Middle Road doesn't strike me as being even in the spirit of affordable housing. This is supposed to be something that's spread out over the town, not something you put in one spot.
Yeah, I think COA and the court sort of looks at it a little differently. It's not really town, it's really by region. So while every town needs to meet its obligation, the court, in determining the obligation, looks at, well, what's the obligation for the region, which is the 3 counties, and you divide that between Mercer, Monmouth, and Ocean, and you divide that into your community. So, and the regulations that COA adopted, which are still in effect, specifically envision these 100% municipal projects. So they're not outlawed, they're in fact encouraged. So,
But I don't see, I understand that if this was not rezoned to meet the court's order, it's like a violation of a contract. I understand that. But with something that is going to inevitably change Holmdel's character, building multiple high-density, multi-story structures. I didn't come here for this. I lived in a high-rise in Manhattan. I came here for exactly what I see around me. I didn't come here to see these, multi-story buildings going up. This will change the character.
As they did in 1993 when they built behind A&P, as they did all through the other 768 in round 2, we had a 768 housing obligation. This is something that is out of control of the township committee.
But they're townhouses. They are not large structures.
Right, but it's still, before those townhouses, this was a farming community with small homes. That also changed the face of the community. I moved here in 1992 to a beautiful community that didn't have a whole bunch of stuff going on Route 35.
Right.
I had to accept what it was. The school population doubled in a matter of minutes from what it was when my son started school to what it was by the time he graduated. That's just you know, I don't know how else to put it. It's like a progress. It's something that's being imposed upon us by the courts. I can tell you that the members of the legislature are taking it up. We've had several hearings on it so that we can bring it, we can take it back out of the courts, because obviously the courts don't understand it. But right now, the Township Committee and this body are between a rock and a hard place, because the court is going to impose this whether we like it or not. And you came in late, so you didn't hear that she's going to do this. I know what Judge O'Brien, that was the previous Judge O'Brien, may have said. He is not in charge anymore.
Right, I know
Judge
she is.
Grasso Jones is in charge, and she has made it very clear that either you do this or she's going to start imposing all kinds of stuff. She's already told Fair Share Housing that they should file an injunction to strip us of our immunity, and she's told this particular developer, the one on Palmer, to file to get the building done there either way. So if we say no tonight, and if the governing body says no next week, you're getting it either way. That's my impression. My impression is that this judge is going to give this development to that gentleman either way.
And also,
So-
in the second round, if you move it somewhere else, it can still go there in the second round.
Right, so.
Fourth, you don't mean the
Yeah,
next round.
the next round.
So it
So,
would just be delayed.
I understand, I denied the application back whatever year that was.
2015.
Right? I told him to go rewrite this board, told him to go pound salt, and guess what? He's back. So we're better off controlling what gets done there and controlling what can happen to the best of our ability. Now we're getting credits for things, we're hoping, and again, they have to come here again and they have to prove to us that they're not going to flood, and all those things have to be proved to us. It's not just a blanket approval. They have to come back to us.
But when it's done, you can't take the building away when it doesn't meet, when it violates everything around it. You know, one of the site suitability things is, does it look like the area? Is it residential like the area?
Right, but we
That's not
haven't seen,
residential area.
seen the plan, we haven't seen what he wants to do, so
Right
right now.
3 stories. though.
Well, it's a 2-story with an underneath. Oh, it's a 3-story?
It's 3 with parking, and the parking's that way above, so it's 3.5 stories.
So, but again, this is something that the judge is already telling us she's going to approve.
Well, she's going to approve the number of units.
No.
She's going to
No,
approve.
she told, and your lawyer should have reiterated that to you because he was sitting right in the room. She said to the lawyer for Palmer Avenue and to Fair Share, and I think it was, you should file a motion to compel the implementation of the court order. This is not just a theory. Like, there's a court order for this site, and the site has been in the settlement agreement from the beginning. And so her tenor and her direction was, because we asked to include those units on Route 35, and she said no. She said, I'm not discussing it. You approved it. We went through a fairness hearing. We adjudicated the appropriateness of the site. The site is appropriate and developable. And I will tell you, Fair Share and Palmer Avenue, you should file a motion to implement the settlement agreement and the court order. So,
And that's the
but we
least
do
of it.
have,
I mean, and that was the nice version.
Yeah,
So,
I know. He
I
came
would
back
tell
to
you
say
that I know it's difficult, and I know it's hard to have it, and you're worried about the flooding and all that. I understand completely. But I have great faith in the fact that because it's going to take some time, and it'll take a little time, that if the Township Committee can mitigate the number of units there, they will, with the dollars that are left over. And I'm sure that the builder will be more than willing, because one of the reasons why he went away was because he wasn't getting enough money from the federal government the last time. Like, he didn't fight us because he was funding. Right, so,
Although when we went in, when Steve Lonick, our attorney, went in and said, almost where would even take, if it's all affordable, they don't care. What they care is the size of the unit and the
right, so
displacement. And if it doesn't flood, literally, he followed, we wrote out instructions, he followed it to the letter. He said, if you can prove it won't cause problems and will mitigate whatever water runoff it's got, it encounters. And if you will limit the size, We don't care if every one of the units is affordable.
We know, we tried to get him to limit
And
the
they-
size. Do you
and-
not, we went through
See, I
that.
don't think
It
the
was
builder's gonna go for that again.
He will if we give him money. That's the point. So if there's dollars left over, we can purchase, the township can purchase from him what he would make in a profit for the market rate units. So let's just do a little bit of math, okay? So right now, he can get 50 affordable, he's gonna build 60, right? That was the same.
48 market,
market.
48, 12, 40.
Right, but it was 60 the last time too, right? So
Yeah.
it's been 60. So he's gonna do 48 market, right? So if the township has some money left over and he would make, round numbers, $100,000 on each unit, I find that unbelievable, but that's the number he probably will come up with. So he's gonna make $100,000. If the township has 500,000 left over, they can buy 5 units from him. They can say, here's 500,000, build 5 less. If they have $1 million left over, here's $1 million, build 10 less. And I trust that they will do that, but they can't commit to that now because they're in the middle of an eminent domain process. And once the eminent domain, that's what the money is there for. The money is in that account, and I have to tell you, what people forget about the history, Ralph's probably the only one maybe besides Bonnie and some of the others that remember, Holmdel Township was in the forefront of making that affordable housing bank. We put that together here. We were also in the forefront of buying back the deeds. We have been one of the towns that has always been in the forefront of making sure, A, we fulfill our obligation, and B, we do it with our best interest of our townspeople in mind. No other town had a bank for dollars and cents that came when you had to build something. Okay, if you don't want to build your obligation, then you have to pay us for it. That's how we have that money in the bank, because the great Senator Gagliano, God rest his soul, he thought of that, and he was our attorney, and he put it in place. And even though we got challenged, and even though we won all those things, we were the first town, we always complied. So I have no doubt that this governing body will not continue in that spirit. So I just need you to and I know it's tough, and I know you don't want it there. I don't want it there either. We have no choice. I personally believe that, it should be countywide. Because people, one of the things when I was mayor and when people were leaving and the rental units that were leaving over and over and so we did like a little exit survey. They could afford the rent, but they couldn't afford to be a resident because of the type of things that were going on. Kids who had North Face jackets, kids who were having Game Boys, and that's how old it was. But that was the problem. And so you make that argument. And when I sit at the legislature, I've sat in several hearings, I've testified in several hearings. The legislators also agree that we don't want to build houses in Far Hills for people to live in Far Hills when their family lives in Jersey City, but we have to find a better way to do this. But right now, the courts took it over because somebody somewhere took advantage of a crack in the dam when Chris Christie said, no more COA, I'm getting rid of it, and then Fair Share Housing swooped in and the courts took over. So right now, we're stuck. And I hear you. We all hear you. The governing body hears you.
But even, there's no way to say, granted, the judge said, file an injunction, go to court over. Is there no way to say, listen, sorry about the settlement agreement. Yes, this is a bad settlement agreement. We have a solution.
They
Why
tried.
not?
Because they tried to put it on Middle Road, and she said no.
We tried to put it on 35.
On 35 rather, and she said no.
Well, because the Palmer Avenue developer has certain rights. He's through the settlement agreement, which is the equivalent of a contract. And they're not going away. They're a property owner with developable rights. That's the issue. It's as simple as that.
Well,
And I know we can go around and around, but thank you.
But just for the
thank you.
record, our relationship with Rutgers University is not over. It's still ongoing. The township's relationship with Rutgers University and that study is still ongoing.
Oh, good. I thought they had finished.
There's a preliminary report. There's a final report forthcoming.
Thank you.
Great. Thank
Thank you
you.
for the
Thank you
time.
so much.
And I'm sorry to everybody for taking.
No,
this.
that's okay.
Good question.
Jay?